Ruthie, essentially what we have here is a prime minister, just like Donald Trump, telling people, don't trust the courts, don't trust the media, don't trust all the people whose job it is to hold me accountable. Believe me, because I'm the leader who speaks for the people. I mean, that's classic populist, you might even say, authoritarian tactics, isn't it?
Look, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's authoritarian. It's as though you're saying that in a democracy, the prime minister doesn't have the right to criticize other
to criticize, absolutely, but to call the country's leading journalists fake news and propaganda channels, there's a line and it was crossed, Ruthie.
Actually, I agree with that about the news channels, because for one thing, aside from everything else, the appalling leaking of investigative materials on the prime minister, that on the TV channels, they're just running with it, and I just
Ruthie,
find
maybe that's exactly the problem, because all we've heard so far about Netanyahu's alleged corruption is these little leaks. We haven't seen the big picture, and perhaps Israelis are going to be more keen to see Netanyahu indicted and overthrown when they see actually the full details of what's in those corruption allegations. Professor Yonah.
Well, 2 points. First, we have to remember what Netanyahu said at the time when Olmert was in a similar situation. And he said that a prime minister on such indictment would not be able to function because of the scope of responsibility laid on his shoulders. So, you know, you've got to do what you're preaching. So this is the first point. And now as to the role of the media in this respect. Hey, let us remember what the media did at the time, about 30 years ago, to Rabin. I mean, they were tearing him apart, they're smashing him. So this is the role of the media. It has to be biting, it has to be very critical, and I don't think that in any way Netanyahu can say that they are biased against him in a particular way different than the bias that they would have, bias, quote unquote, the bias that they would have against or towards any other prime minister holding this job, and specifically having the weight of the indictment, you know, that we are hearing these reports, you know, about really crude corruption. And
of course, we don't know the full picture because it's just based on leaks.
Well, of course. But then again, I'll go back to my first point. He is the man who actually wanted to dictate the rule how prime minister should behave. And so, you know, well.
Yes, but we all remember
Prime
Minister Netanyahu also calling for term limits once for Prime Minister, and that's another course that's gone out the window. Einat, help me with something I don't understand. On the one hand, Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying that the leading channels are propaganda outlets, they are fake news, these are lies. On the other hand, he's filing a complaint with the Attorney General over these channels, saying that they're leaking information. So what is it? Are they leaking real information from behind the scenes, or is it fake news?
It is both. What matters is...
How can it be both?
It's an all-out war. It's an all-out war in which the idea is to discredit anyone that could be an enemy, anyone that could threaten his continued stand. And in that sense, it is the populist textbook in the sense of what is populism? Populism says whatever the public wants, the public will get, regardless of what the courts say or what the media say or
without
what our
those sorts of filters and checks and balances.
Exactly. So this is all at war, and it doesn't matter. You don't use logic in that sense. You're basically trying to discredit anything you do.
Well, I don't know. We have actually a supporter of the Prime Minister. He's someone who's more sympathetic to his positions. Ruthie, how do you square this? On the one hand, it's fake news. On the other hand, these are leaks and they have to stop. Are they real or are they fake?
Let me just go back to what you mentioned about former Prime Minister Olmert, who ended up going to jail. At the time, I was very, very against his politics, but I was against his stepping down and going to jail. I don't think anything was served by his being imprisoned. And second of all, even then I said, let's defeat his ideology at the ballot box. And therefore, I am just being consistent. That's how I feel about Netanyahu. As it happens, my politics happen to be more in line with Netanyahu's than with other parties.
Well, let's move on.